Hey there, it's Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads video. I'm going to be talking about 10 of my latest recent reads, and for all of these books I'll have content warnings in the description box down below. But without further ado, let's get down to the books. So one of the books that I recently read was Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo, which is a very well-known black literary fiction novel. We're following a couple who are married and they're living in Lagos in Nigeria, and they are struggling to get pregnant. She just can't seem to get pregnant. And finally some of the extended family start meddling and they suggest that he gets a second wife so that he can get this other wife pregnant, and she is not very on board with the idea and neither is he, but they end up doing that, and that's where this story kicks off. I really enjoyed this book and I think it was such a good read. It has been a very long time since I've read a literary fiction novel that had as many plot twists and turns as this book did. I think it can be so easy to fall into the character driven, emotionally driven and thematically charged literary driven books, but this one, no. It decided it was going to do something different and I loved it. I loved the fact that we were getting just plot points even though it was a character driven story. You switch between points of view in this one and I think it used those points of view so very well. I loved our main character. I really felt for her. She was really struggling with her infertility, and you can see that as she's going through the highs and lows of the mental process of having to struggle with infertility, having to struggle with the way that other women perceive her and how her family perceives her, it just crumbles her. And that was a big emotional journey to go on, but that's literally only where the journey starts because a whole heap more comes into this. What I also really liked is that a lot of the Nigerian politics and a lot of the culture is woven into this as well. So the Nigerian politics doesn't take the forefront of the story, but it's very much there and present in the background and underlying everything. So I felt like I was learning about Nigerian events that happened, but it was still very tied to the story and contributed to the choices that the characters made in this one. The ending was very good. I think it ended just where the story needed it to end. I liked that it was a little bit open. It's not entirely open, but it closes the threads that it needs to close, and from the way that it ended you can see where the focus is in this book. You get two points of view, but you can see that the focus is very much firmly on the woman in this story, and the ending solidified that, and so I was quite satisfied with what was left open and what was closed up for us, and it was just the perfect place for the story to end. Pure genius, such a well written book, and I cannot wait to read Ayobami's latest novel. I also recently read The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. Now this is a novella. It's a sci-fi dystopian feeling novella set in the future where we're following Idir, and Idir is a refugee seeking citizenship in Britain, and he goes to do his citizenship test hoping he will answer all of the questions right, but in the midst of this test something big goes down, something life-changing, something dangerous that threatens his life and the lives of those around him, and it's about what happens when he takes the test. I think that's all I can tell you. You should check the content warnings for this going in, but I thought it was really clever. I liked that it was short. I think it was just as long as it needed to be. It packed a punch, it left me thinking, and then it ended just where it needed to. And I'm loving short stories that know how to be a good short story, but that doesn't mean it doesn't take the time to lean into those sci-fi elements where they are necessary. It cleverly discusses and touches on the power that governments have over refugees who are just simply seeking safety, and the psychological warfare they have to undergo and the hoops that they have to jump through to get that citizenship, or to even get the possibility of that citizenship. There's also two points of view in this one, and I quite liked that it flip-flopped between those points of view, because by having those two points of view you get to see from someone who is already granted citizenship for whatever reason and why they ended up with citizenship and why they agree or disagree with what's happening in this book, and then you get to hear from the people who are undergoing the process and what that's like. I promise you it's more exciting than I'm making it sound, but I don't want to give the game away, and it is quite intense, but it did a lot. It did a lot in under 100 pages, and I was impressed. So this reading wrap up is a bit strange because it's bridging the end of my reading year and the new reading year, so you are going to hear about some Christmassy stories in this one, and one of those Christmassy stories I have to talk to you about is a romance called Lovelight Farms by BK Borison. It's no secret that Christmas is my favourite holiday basically, so I try and read as many Christmas books as I can in December, and this was one of them. So in this one you're following a woman who runs a Christmas tree farm, and everything seems to be going wrong for her when there's an opportunity to be entered into a competition, and if she wins that competition it gives the Christmas tree farm a lot of publicity, so she signs up for it. But she also says on her application that she has a boyfriend, but lo and behold, she does not. She instead ends up asking her best friend to fake be her boyfriend throughout the competition, and that's how this romance situation kicks off. Now, I went into this one because I wanted a fake dating romance. I don't think that's the right way to go into this book. I think if you want to read this book, you should go in expecting a friends to lovers romance, because the friends to lovers romance vibes in this are immaculate. It does such a good job of showing their very sweet, genuine, wholesome, cute friendship between Stella and Luca in this book. I loved their friendship. It was so present and lovely to see on the page, but also it really talks about the difficulties of risking such a close friendship for a relationship and taking that next step. That's unbelievably difficult, and it's unbelievably hard to kind of process how difficult that is, and I think this book talks about the daring you have to do, the risking of everything that you love about this person to see if a relationship could work. And it also meant the slow burn hints of their like flirtatious manner underneath their friendship that goes throughout this is just so intense. I just loved it. It was such a good slow burn. Those slow burn moments were done so well. So for the fake dating side of this, do you know what it was? It was practice dating. Now, I think there's a big difference between the fake dating trope and the practice dating trope. You can fight me on this, but I really do think they are quite different things. And so I was disappointed on the fake dating front, but it did the practice dating very well, because for the majority of this, their fake dates are actually practice dates before the person shows up that they need to fake date in front of. So largely they're practice dates, and they're very cute and they're very sweet. This book is almost too sweet in the fact that I don't think there's as much plot going on here. If you just want a light-hearted, low stakes, Christmassy romance, and this romance spans between autumn to Christmas, then this is what you're going to get. Don't go into this thinking there's going to be a big dramatic ending. It's not really, and sometimes it's nice. It's nice to read those quiet, gentle romances that are just so sweet and just so cute at the cheesiest time of year. So I really enjoyed this book. I had a very good time with it. I do wish that the Christmas farm, everything's going wrong storyline had a bit more of a cinch to the moment where everything gets worked out. And while there are one or two steamy scenes in this, I will say that for me they're medium steam level, and so they were just fine to read. They weren't my favourite, but they were really cute and genuine because of the friendship that these characters have with each other. But the highlight of this book and what made it what it was really Luca and Stella just being very sweet and lovely people to each other. I struggled with the nickname Lala. I just couldn't get behind him like a grown man calling women Lala all the time, genuinely with a serious straight face, but that's just me struggling with random names that happen in fiction romance books apparently. Another romance. I know it was Christmas, I know it was winter, and I shouldn't have been reading my summery romance books, but I did. I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, and I had such a good time. I raced through this in a couple of days, and this is the film Wild Child, but in book form. So if you like the film Wild Child, you are really going to enjoy this book. So in this one we're following Piper. She's a spoiled model, and she is just basically an influencer. She's a spoiled influencer who has a lot of money, and when one day she goes overboard in what she does, her stepfather decides to send her away to the small town, the small seaside town where her father used to live, who is deceased, and she has to kind of bring the bar back to life to earn the right to come back home again to her old life. And her sister volunteers to go with her, so it's her and her sister in this small seaside town, and they don't have any life skills. They don't know how to cook, they don't know how to clean, they don't know how to do anything. Cue in our love interest, and he is this grumpy, super stoic fisherman who has a really tough job, and he just doesn't like the fact that Piper has waltzed into town and has decided to be this bubbly light of sunshine controlling the shots. He just wants to grieve for his dead wife as he has been doing for several years, and for nothing to change. But of course it's going to change. And it's basically the plot of Wild Child. She has to learn how to be independent and live for herself, and he has to learn how to move on from his wife and kind of start living his life again. And it is just so lovely. It was just so lovely. I do think sometimes this book fell into the cringe romance category, where she would say things like his big hands. At one point he couldn't even type the digits on his phone because his fingers were so big, and of course he's really tall, and of course undeniable male scent. All of that was cringy, but that aside, I just really loved Piper. She's a bubble of sunshine, and she is rich and she's spoiled, but she is just so genuine and really wants to do the best that she can. And I loved the relationship she has with her sister. Her and her sister are polar opposites to each other, but I really liked how even though they were polar opposites to each other, they completely 100% understood each other. They understood what would make each other happy. They understood that Piper would be doing her makeup while her sister would be mixing music, and that was the way that they worked, and they could fit together. And as someone who's really close to my sisters, I always just love seeing a genuine, really well done sister relationship in a book like this one. It had really nice small town vibes because she's sent off to this small isolated town, and if you like a little small town romance, it does have bits of it here too. And the ways in which the couple just wanted to grow for each other but also would value the differences between each other was just really nice, and they did a good job of communicating and having those tough conversations. I really appreciated it, and I just think this was a cute, genuine romance. It has some steamy scenes, but as I said for the other book, it's medium steamy scene level. They were good. They weren't my cup of tea particularly, but my cup of tea is quite intense, I've discovered, so it was a good time. And I look forward to reading or trying more Tessa Bailey in the future. Another Christmas romance book I read, you can see I read a few, is Only for the Holidays by Abiola Bello. So this is a young adult romance, and it is following these two characters. We've got Quincy. Quincy is going through a difficult time. He lives in a small town, and his best friend had sex with his girlfriend, and they basically cheated on him together, and he's not talking to either of them, and he's just feeling horrible. And then we've got Tia, who's a bit of a bratty girl sometimes. She lives in London, in the city, and her boyfriend, who she's been with for a year, has said he wants to go on a break. And when she gets whisked away to have a Christmas holiday with her family in the middle of nowhere, she's not very happy to be there, and it happens to be where Quincy's family works, their B&B. It is really cute. I gave this book 5 stars and it became a new favourite. It was one of the best things I read at the end of the year, and I had a delightful time with this. I just love reading black romance, and to have like a black young adult romance is so genuinely nice, especially a Christmas one. I just don't really get to see that much, so I cherish the fact that I had this book. Quincy, the teenage boy in this, just stole the show for me. He is genuinely the most loveliest person, the most genuine person, who's a typical teenage boy, but he just wants to be the best that he can be for everyone that he knows, and he's so lovely. And I felt so much anger for the way that his friends have treated him in this and how they robbed him, because he absolutely did not deserve it. He is such a cinnamon roll of a character. He's essentially the nice guy finally getting his dues in this book. And Tia as well grew on me, and I really like seeing her character development, because girl does a lot of growing in this one, and she is going through a breakup in a relationship, as in like taking a break in a relationship, and she's figuring out what she wants for herself, figuring out what she deserves, but also figuring out what she does and doesn't want from a relationship, which can be really hard to churn through. And I appreciated the fact that she grew as she did it. They were very cute as a couple. I was believing their romance, and it had its ups and downs. There's entirely no miscommunication in this whatsoever. Like, none of the tension is brought about by miscommunication, but I appreciated that this book still managed to have tension, even though they were very clear with each other from day one, always. There's an element of fake dating in this book, and it does the fake dating well. I really like the fake dating. It ticked all of the boxes for that trope, while it's still carrying enough of other elements of the story to make it not all about the fake dating. And as well as that, I really like the fact that both of them have siblings, so both of them come from families where there's mum, dad, multiple siblings, and I really liked seeing all of the interactions between the siblings, because the siblings were there for each other, and the siblings had their own dramas on the side, but It meant that the secondary characters were very fleshed out, were very brought to life, and were very involved. And also the parents were very involved in this young adult novel, which is always a plus for me, because no teenagers are running around willy-nilly if they've got parents who genuinely care for them. A book that presently surprised me recently is You'd Look Better as a Ghost by Joanna Wallace. So this is a crime serial killer book with a lot of black, dark, satirical humour. Now, I didn't think I was the person for this genre, but clearly I was wrong, because I very much am. I had such a good time with this book. So in this one we're following, I think her name was Claire, our main character, and she is a serial killer. She goes around and she kills people willy-nilly. If they look at her wrong, she might kill them. If they do something bad to her and they're wearing ugly clothes, she will kill them. She will kill them for the slightest reason. And even though I say for the slightest reason, she doesn't go overboard with it, so she's been able to get away with it quite well up until now. Now it seems like somebody is watching her. Now somebody may be on her case. We've had to move a little bit due to the sunlight, but yes, so now somebody is onto her. Now somebody may be on her case, so she is going to try and see who's figuring things out about her and see if she can kill them before they give up the game of her secret. It also has a lot of flashbacks to the past, so you can see why and how she becomes a serial killer. And I know I preempted this by saying it's a satirical dark humor book, but please do check your content warnings, because this character has gone through a lot in her past, a lot of dark things, and it's very intense and it's all there on the page. And while this book is funny and humorful, it's actually dealing with a lot of really tough subjects. I've also talked extensively about it being a serial killer book, but there is so much more to this book, and I think the commentary that it gives is what makes this book unique. So while it is about a serial killer killing people, she's also grieving the loss of her father, who she genuinely did love, and she is going to a support group to manage her grief. And seeing her go through those stages of grief and understand how people are grieving around her was really emotional, just because she's really working through that. But also, equally, this book is talking about what it means to become elderly, to the point where you might need to go to an elderly home, and it's talking about the lack of care and the abuse that elderly people often face in care. And so it really was serious in those moments where it tackled the terrible abuse that some elderly people face, but also it delved into the nuances of it and how people who are care workers working in that industry are underpaid and understaffed and under so much pressure, and that's why they end up cutting corners, and things like abuse can get taken advantage of because nobody notices, because there's not enough people around. And so even though I was like laughing at the ridiculousness and the audacity of this serial killer on one hand, I was also appreciating the representation of grief in this, and also thinking, yeah, this is saying some really important stuff about the elderly care situation. So this book managed to pack quite a few things into it. It did have its repetitive moments in terms of the flashbacks always happen at a certain point and they are quite similar, and also the ending, you've got to suspend your disbelief for it quite a bit, but I enjoyed the ending nonetheless. I thought it was entertaining and funny and very well suited for the humour of the book. So even though you've got to suspend your disbelief a little bit, and even though the characters are entirely unlikable, which is not usually something I appreciate, I did really like how it was done here. I think it did a good job of an unlikable main character, and it managed all of its themes well. This is what the finished cover looks like because I'm holding the proof here, but You'd Look Better as a Ghost was an enjoyable read. I also read some middle grade, so I read Coco, Akanbi and The Heart of Midnight, and this is by Motunrayo Adebisi. This is a middle grade book where a young boy is going to be spending time with his aunt because he's been so disobedient at school, but when he goes back to this land that he hasn't visited in a very long time, he discovers that there is magic that exists, and actually the leadership people are doing something really terrible and they want to control the Heart of Midnight, and if they do manage to control the Heart of Midnight, it's going to have catastrophic effects for a lot of the people in the country. So he's going to do something about that with these newfound powers that seem to be emerging within him. and I thought this book was just okay. I've really been reading a lot of middle grade fantasy because I've been very much enjoying the genre, and I've specifically been looking for diverse middle grade fantasy lately that I've been enjoying as much as some of the non-diverse ones I've been reading. But unfortunately I just wasn't quite impressed with this. I think it was very, very samey. I've read a lot of middle grade fantasy that has African mythology and folklore elements to it that just feel very much the same, and the most fun thing about them is the fact that they've got that Yoruba or that African mythology to them, because I'm learning about different creatures and different magic systems than what I'm used to. And again, I think that was my favourite part of this. We've also got a main character who's got sickle cell disease, and so you see him grappling with his sickle cell disease while also going on these adventures. And again, I think that was an element of this book that I really, really liked. But I do think some of the characters felt a bit stale, as in they didn't quite come to life as much as they possibly could have, and the plot was good, but I just wasn't as invested in the plot as I would have wanted to be for a middle grade fantasy book. And so I was kind of just reading through it, and a lot of the plot beats were similar to ones that I've read before. It was a nice time, it's just not a time that I'm really going to remember, and I wouldn't want to read any more if there are more books in this series, which I think there possibly will be. It was a good time, but it just didn't quite tick all the boxes for me. I've recently read a trilogy that I absolutely adored, and that is the new Camelot series by Simone. So this is 3 books. The first one is called American Queen, the second one is called American Prince, and the last one is called American King. Now these are Arthurian legend retellings where we're following the president, the vice president, and a politician's daughter. They are polyamorous, threesome, BDSM, steamy books. So you've got the equivalent of like Lancelot, Gwen, and Arthur, if I'm translating that into Camelot speak. And in this one, the president is the one who is a dom. He's got some really kinky sexual tastes, and he happens to fall in love with his best friend in the past, but he is also falling in love with our main character in the first book, American Queen, who is called Greer. So I'm going to tell you some things about these books, and then you should probably look at my Goodreads review because I think I summarise it better there, but I'm going to go through them book by book. So in the first one, we're following Greer. She's a politician's daughter, and Merlin warns her never to kiss anybody because it will have tragic consequences. But she does. She meets this man at a politician's rally and she kisses him, and she finds out that he is later the president and becomes the president. And the president sends his vice president to go and fetch her because he wants to start a relationship with her. And this jumps from the past to the future quite a bit, which makes sense because King Arthur is the once and future king. And I think the time jumps worked. I think the time jumps worked because in the beginning you've got to be a bit patient with this book. There's a touch of an underage romantic thing at the beginning, and it just seems a little bit strange at the beginning, but if you give it time, the Arthurian legend retelling elements come into it a bit more, and at its core this book is a really nice romance between 3 people who have genuine chemistry. They all really like each other and they all work well as individual couples but also as a threesome group. And this book talks about navigating what it means when you fall in love with more than one person, because none of these characters are familiar with the term polyamory, and none of them are familiar with the situation of polyamory, especially as one of them is the president and the other is the vice president. So if their queerness becomes outed, as it is, but also if their polyamory becomes outed, it's going to have massive consequences for their career. And as none of them are familiar with polyamory, it's very messy and angsty. They all want each other, they all love each other, they're all pining for each other, but they don't know how to start those conversations. How can they have a relationship as a 3? They don't know how to navigate that. And in the process of them working it out, a lot of things happen in terms of the political situations that they're grappling with, because there is a plot to this highly steamy book. There is a plot, like a plot that actually could be a book all on its own. And they also have a lot of sex, and in this book, let me tell you, the steamy scenes of the BDSM, they're so very well done and they're so very well written. I don't know how Simone always does it, but it ticked all of my boxes and it was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed Greer as our main character. She is the woman in this threesome, and I think she had a lot of fight to her. She had a lot of individuality. She's very smart, she's very intelligent, and she knows what she's doing, and I really liked seeing that manifest in this book and come through in the ways in which she's learning about desire and what she wants, but also what she wants in life. And there are moments in this for the plot to work where she has to make some very silly mistakes, but at the same time I don't entirely blame her because it has a lot to do with a family member, and I think I would be entirely blameless if a family member was doing the same things to me. I really like this book. I think it was really smart and very, very good. I gave it 5 stars and it became a new favourite right at the end of the year. And by the way, I read that book in less than 24 hours. That's how addictive it was. I then immediately continued on to read American Prince, which is the sequel, and this one is from Embry, the Vice President's point of view. And from the way that things end in the first one, you can just tell that this is the book where it's going to be full to the brim of angst. Now, I am someone who grew up on Twilight, who grew up on The Mortal Instruments, who grew up on teenagers being the angsty messes that they are, and I love it. I eat angst up for breakfast. So I had the best time with how angsty this one was. In this book, you particularly go and unpick the relationship between two characters who have known each other for 15 years, but it means that you got to get to know certain characters better who might come off as standoffish in the first one, and so I appreciated getting more insight into why they made the choices that they did, and then also how they ended up at the point that they end up. It was really, really good. I really, really liked it. And I had the best time reading about the past. It's seriously messy, and if you know the storyline of Arthurian legend, it does go into the messier elements of the mythology and legendary lore. So expect that, read the content warnings that I'm leaving you down below. And I appreciated it. It was a bit hit and miss there, but it just had to do it if it was going to be a proper full-on retelling, and I liked how it was handled. And then in the second half, it spends more time in the present day storyline because the plot really kicks off so that the finale can be, the third book in the book can be what it is. And it does a good job of ending where it needed to end, for it to be almost a cliffhanger, for me to just feel like I needed to read the third book because it was so very suspenseful where it ended. The plot really kicks in that latter half, and I loved it. I was eating it up. I was like, oh my gosh, this plot twist, oh my gosh, this reveal. I thought I was just going to read a steamy book, but no, I got a steamy book that has intense moments to the plot, which was my favourite thing. I haven't talked about the steamy scenes in this quite a bit, but that's because in the first half of the book, the steamy scenes were not my kind at all, and I'm specifically talking about the ones that happen in the present day. There's a certain type of play that happens that it just doesn't work for me. It's a roleplay thing, it's a BDSM thing. I'll leave that as the first content warning down below, but that does not tick my boxes, does nothing for me, and I just had to read it. But then all of the steamy scenes that happen in the past storyline and all of the ones that happen in the present storyline in the second half of the book were just as great as I'm used to from Sarah Simone, and was steamy and hot and everything I wanted and ticked all of my boxes. So I just had to kind of get through those first 2 scenes that weren't really my cup of tea, and then I got better steamy scenes that were my thing and had a lot of fun with those. Embry is my favourite character as well, so I love that we got his point of view. And then everything was lined up for it to be a super intense final book, and oh my goodness did Sarah Simone deliver. There is undoubtedly less of a focus on the steamy scenes in the third book because it has a lot of ground to cover in terms of plot, and it covered it. It covered it, it covered it, it did it. It did that plot and it worked it to the bone. It managed to have all of the new Camelot Arthurian legend elements to it. It managed to have suspense and build that suspense throughout the whole book until you got to the finale and a big decision had to be made. If you know Arthurian legend, you know how it ends, and you just had to question and wonder, would Sarah Simone do what the ending of the original legendary myth does, or doesn't she? And I won't tell you because you have to read it to find out. I really liked how it handled the steamy stuff in it. I think the steamy scenes were good. I liked them. Nothing compares to the first 2 where she had more time to focus on the steamy stuff. The steamy stuff we did get was very good and was very enjoyable, but it just wasn't the primary focus of this book, and therefore can't really be the primary focus of my review. It still managed to have a lot of angst in this one, and I will say that I always thought I didn't like the hate to lovers trope, and I realised in this particular book that I can like the hate to lovers trope. It just needs to be done very well, because you need to have the characters kind of hate each other and love each other at the same time, and for that emotional balance to really capitulate at some point, and also for it to be dragged out for a long time, because this hate to love kind of situation, which is not exactly hate to love, but like hate and love situation, has been threaded through all 3 books, and I only realised it in the 3rd one, which I thought was very well done, but also just really good continuity handled all the way through the book. I did really like the fact that it wasn't only Ash's point of view that you got in this 3rd and final book. I will say that because I was kind of dreading it. He's the character who I like the least, the one who feels the most stoic, standoffish and unavailable emotionally to us as a reader, but when I read his book I did not expect to relate to his point of view so much, in the fact that he really cares about the people that he loves, and he's struggling with a lot of responsibility, and maybe he overloads his to-do list far too much and carries way more stress than he needs to. In that regard I really related to him, and so actually this book made me understand him better and like him more as a character, and I was impressed that I could see character development happening in the 3rd and final book in a series. I think that's impressive and shows good continuity. And I'm going to say that word one more time because she also fills in a lot of gaps that I didn't realise that she was leaving. There are moments in previous books where you don't get to hear what people say, or you don't get to see what people do, or you know that something's happened and you're getting the follow through and not what actually happened. And then in the 3rd book she kind of reveals all of that. She fills in all the stops, she fills in all the gaps, and she answers all of the questions, and I didn't even know that I wanted answers to the questions until I got them, which I just think is pretty clever, you know? Have an actual storyline and a plot to your steamy books is not easy, but she did that, and she blended that, and it was basically, this is what I like to see in a romantasy, because yes, it is Arthurian legend and magic, so it has some elements of fantasy, I would say, but it's still a romance at its core, and it's a steamy one to boot. I just think it was a really well done series, and I had to give the final book in the series 5 stars, and it became a new favourite as well. Simone is the author I read the most of in 2023, with a total of 5 books, which is really impressive, and I really had a great time ending my reading year with her, but also starting my new reading year by finishing off this trilogy. So there you have it. Those are all of my recent reads. I've been enjoying switching to recent reads, and I'm going to be doing another one very soon as I've continued reading. Please let me know in the comments section down below, have you read any of these books? What was the last book you recently read, and what did you think of it? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!